Okay, let's go ahead and get started on this portion of our stream, the coding session. We're continuing our work on learning how to do the uh, Terraria modding. So I have an idea for it. I'm looking through this and it feels like this feels like it's going to be a pretty hefty project overall. Um, so but we'll see what we can do with it at the very least. Um, we've covered basic guide prerequisites all the way down to the basic load mass guide, and so far the majority of these I you know haven't really had a major need for them. Based off of the mod idea that I had. Um, so um, like minion guide and stuff like that, probably not gonna happen. Um, probably not gonna. Well, I mean, I might need the recipe guide. I don't know. There might be certain elements here that I could use, right? NPC spawning guide. Nope, don't need that one. Um, drops in loot guide. Probably not gonna need that one either. Um, but the well, okay. I might not necessarily need to code it up in such a way where I'm going to enact a drop or loot guide, but this might be helpful for me to get a understanding of like, hey, if I want to, access all the potential materials that are out there, in a sense, kind of see what the guide sees in his crafting code, because I'll probably be needing that, to be honest. I'll probably be needing the guide's crafting code to kind of build the tech tree out, right? Um, then, um, you know, so there might be elements that I might still need to use. Um, but we're going to kind of continue going down through the list here, through the easy guides. Then we'll tackle like the intermediate guides, the advanced guides, the expert guides, um, and then we'll see about I I don't know if I really need anything more here, but for the time being, we're just going to use our basic um, you know testing mod process there to make sure that everything is working perfectly fine here. Um, so, um, so let's go ahead and get into the next section, shall we? So, IEntitySource. So if you're making a 1.4 tModLoader mod, I mean, sure, I guess. You will need to use IEntitySource. This guide will go over the purpose of IEntitySource and the most frequent uses of it. Okay. Well, I guess um, apparently I'm gonna need it as well because they're not really giving me any. You know, it says you will need to use, so it's like, okay, even for a user interface. I mean, I guess maybe. So IEntitySource works with the onspawn hooks to provide additional information about why a projectile NPC item is spawned in the world. There are two primary use cases. Altering the properties of NPC projectile only when spawned from a specific context, e.g. bombs from pots or minions of a boss. Transferring stats or buffs, such as NPC banner ID or player weapon crit chance, from the source to the spawn entity, normally a projectile. Okay, but I don't need either one of those. If I'm doing a user interface, I'm not going to be needing either one of these. I'm not going to need to alter the properties of anything, and I'm not necessarily transferring stats or buffs when I'm looking at and when I'm looking at a tech tree. So both of these are already not needed. So hopefully there's more to the IEntity. Otherwise, this statement right there is wrong. But I'll give them a benefit of the doubt. We'll see. For example, when a boss NPC spawns minions, those minions respond with the IEntitySource. That's fine. Value resulting from the helper method, get source from AI. Okay. The result of that helper method is the entity source parent class with the entity type, entity field of type NPC. Okay. I mean, there's that. I mean, okay, considering if you want to follow the conversation that I'm about ready to have with Kirito, you can check out the Conceptis Puzzle that I've been posting. One of the one that I'm going to be kind of posting same day as this one. Um, you know, August 8th. Um, okay. The Jedi Order in 1, 2, and 3, let's face it, they were pretty much at the height of their ego. Okay. They were at that point where, um, you know, they were ignoring warning signs. They were, you know, uh, you know, arrogant to the extreme. They could do no wrong. Um, you know, um, they didn't even want to like, they could sense the anger in Anakin, but it felt like they didn't really want to work with him to try to control it more, kind of thing, or to try to, you know, work on that a little bit more, you know. Um, Now a lot of the blame could also be thrown onto Obi-Wan for, trying to train him as good as Yoda. Um, but even then, that failed. So, um, in a sense, I wouldn't necessarily put all the blame on Mace Windu. Um, I would put the blame on pretty much all the Jedi. You know, I think Yoda might have been the best one out of the bunch to, like, if Yoda kind of kept um Anakin like under his wing, like constantly, like all the time, then I probably could have seen Anakin being like a full-on Jedi. Like he never would have gone Darth Vader route. Okay, because I feel like Yoda would have been able to try to train Anakin to try to understand his feelings and so on and so forth, guide him to the proper way of managing said feelings, and go, wait, you're thinking about your mother again. What's going on? Ah, she's in trouble. Okay, I'm gonna send some Jedi out to find out what happened to her, so we can get that resolved. Done, right? Or something along those lines. It's one of those things where it's like, um, but they kind of treated Anakin like any other person, any other kind of um, Padawan, And that was the problem, you know. Um, his was a special case, and they needed to kind of treat him a little bit differently than what they, than obviously than what they did. So, you know, but they were so wrapped up in their own that they eventually failed. So. The result of the helper method is the entity parent class with the entity field of type NPC. This IEntitySource could then be detected by a mod that intended to reduce the HP of all boss minions by half. This additional info can help facilitate many more effects that were previously impossible to accomplish with mods. Again, this doesn't really help my process of making a user interface as a tech tree. Because we're not necessarily modifying anything. We're not modifying any bonuses or anything along those lines with the tech tree. So right now already, again, we're not really seeing a need for it too much yet, but we'll see. Um, there's a lot more on the sand. Plus, he trained kids for 300 years, so he's known how to deal with raw emotions. Exactly, and that's why it's like, um, it's like as soon as he saw the fact that Anakin already had, fear for his mother in him, Yoda should have said, one, Yoda should have definitely like put his foot down and said, "We're not training them whatsoever. Send him back home. We're not dealing with that." And then, Anakin might have been sent home, never trained by the Jedi, and then maybe, just maybe, Palpatine would have never have seen him and would have had to have tried to get his own, additional apprentices elsewhere, right? And Darth Vader never would have been a major evil force that he was, right? Um, or Yoda should have just, said, Anakin, no, you're newly appointed Jedi Knight. We're taking him. We're going to train him properly. We need to make sure that his fear is resolved, handled. Um, you know, uh, you know, or properly processed kind of thing, so that he never has that fear. Or we need to basically help him get past his fear and be able to handle his emotions better than what Obi-Wan could do. Obi-Wan took too much upon himself at that point. He made the promise that he would train the boy, and well, he was inadequate to the job. So, Yoda should have stepped on up and handled more. So, but they had that system in place, the council, the train, the Jedi Temple, and so on and so forth, and they kind of kept with, I guess I guess you might say, they kept with their normal way of doing things. And because of that, and the fact that they were arrogant and uh, the thoughts that they could do no wrong and so on and so forth, they they basically ignored what was kind of going on right in front of them, and Anakin was manipulated and tricked and confused by the fact that he had a strong love for Padme. He was getting tricked and confused by Palpatine. Um, he was seeing a lot of, you know, he was seeing all the things that Palpatine was saying about how the Jedi Order, wasn't perfect, right? So, um, so yeah, you know, they basically let it happen. So, put too much faith into Obi-Wan. Um, well, the thing was that all he had to do was like look into the future and see the fact that emotions were the future, right? He could have looked into um, Anakin's future and saw blind hatred. He could have seen, um, outright pain, suffering, heartbreak from Obi-Wan, from everybody in the Jedi Temple, and so on and so forth. Um, so, I mean, and it all kind of could have stemmed from Anakin right there. Just the fact that it was like Anakin blind rage. It's like that's that should have been a warning sign. It's like hello, that kind of thing. So now, don't get me wrong. I don't know like how far in the future Jedi can see and stuff like that. Bear in mind, like um, Luke was only able to see, you know, um, like a couple days or something like that in the future, with Cloud City, right? Could have been just a couple days. Is the idea of future events only a couple days old, or could it be like years or future? I don't really know. Okay, they never really. I never seen anything that really went into like the amount of time that you can kind of do. But I mean, they said that Yoda was the strongest at that particular moment of time until Anakin showed up, right? So, but yeah, Anakin Skywars Wars 19 when Clone Wars started. You can make an argument way too young. Well, I mean, when Anakin was brought into the temple for the first time, he was what 6, 7 years old. Um, or maybe a little bit older. I don't really remember. Um, but the thing was that um, you know they could if they were able to if the Jedi could sense like years or decades into the future and stuff like that, and saw Anakin being a source of you know raw hatred and stuff like that, then Yoda should have said, "No, no, Obi-Wan, sorry, he's far too dangerous. We need to make sure that we need to work on his emotions because he's, um, you know, this is way too much of a powder cake here. That kind of thing." But if the limitation is only like a couple days, a week, month, or something like that in the future, and that's about as much as you can do, then then I can understand them kind of um, trying to put a little bit more faith on Obi-Wan, not knowing the fact that um, Anakin was, um, going to be the Slayer of all Jedi. So let's see. Note that on-spawn does not let you prevent the spawning of an entity. On IL hooks are currently required for that, but such a hook could be considered in the future. causing a returned entity to be the dummy entry slot in the end of the array. See example source-dependent projectile tweaks, example source-dependent item tweaks, and projectile with growing damage classes an example mod for some uses. Do not store IEntitySources in fields. The validity of the information they encapsulate is only relevant at the moment of spawning. Any lasting effects of the source information will need to be registered in fields within your mod at the time of spawning. Details on why it is a bad idea are too advanced for this guide. Okay. The following commonly used methods require an entity source. New Gore direct, new Gore perfect, quick spawn item, quick spawn clone item, new NPC, new projectile direct. Okay, well, don't really need those. Or at least I don't really see a need for any of that right at the moment. So in my Star Wars OC broke Jedi code all the time. You use morals over code. My Star Wars OC seen that Jedi way, what cost village be overtaken. He break the code and rolls to save a village. Well, mm, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to get at there. Okay, because Jedi were meant to try to save as many lives as they possibly could. Okay. Um, you know, they were, the protectors of justice and order throughout the galaxy. That's their words of it, right? Um, so, you know, they wouldn't go into a village and say, okay, slaughter all the citizens, right? That's not that's not the way Jedi work. Okay. They wouldn't order that. Okay. If they did, then that's stupid. I don't know why a Jedi would ever give that kind of command, right? So, um, you know, a Jedi would basically say, okay, you know, we have a battle, and unfortunately the village is right in the center. Okay, we need to evacuate everybody from that village, otherwise they're going to be dead. Um, you know, Army put up, protective perimeters around the village to kind of keep, everybody available to escape and so on and so forth, right? So, um, you know, I mean, Yoda himself kind of said it when you know, in Clone Wars around, the fact that he brought in the clone army and he was saying, set up a protective, you know, team around the Jedi. When the ships kind of dropped into the arena to protect the remaining Jedi that were there, you know, um, he was trying to protect everybody that was there. So that's why it's like I don't know what you're kind of referring to there. So okay, from using sources. If in doubt, use something which extends the entity source parent. Most of the time, this means calling get source from this, from AI, from source, death, on hit, on hurt. Entity source parent is the most important source. TML uses this to transfer values such as banner ID to respond to, crit chance, armor penetration from the parent NPC or player plus item in the case of entity source item use, to a spawn projectile. These values are also transferred from parent projectiles to child projectiles via entity source parent, ensuring the initial source value is retained. NPC spawning projectiles should use get source from AI. NPC item drops should use get source loot, if loot, or drop as item, if anything else. Note that 99.9% of NPC item drops should be using the new loot system. NPC spawning other NPC, such as boss minions, should use get source from AI. NPC spawning Goron death should use get source death. Projectile spawning items, such as air recovery drops, should use get source drop as item. Projectile spawning other projectiles, like splitting projectile or shooting minion, should use get source from this. A lot of this is nothing that I'll probably be needing, but I mean, it can still potentially be helpful. Held projectile weapons spawning other projectiles using ammo should use item use with potential ammo. Spawning minions or pets in update use get source buff. And accessory spawning a projectile use gets source accessory or get source accessory on hurt. An armor set bonus spawning a projectile gets source from this. Spawning things and use item or any mod item not covered elsewhere get source item use. Player spawning projectiles and shoot should use the source passed into the method. Tile dropping an item, kill multi-tile or global tile.drop should use get item source from tile break. Player spawning an item due to dropping or being unable to recover an item from a user interface slot. Get item overflow should use entity source over full inventory player. Okay. Yeah, pretty much all of this I don't see a need for in terms of the user interface. Um, so yeah, it's feeling like more and more of this is pretty much, you know, they say that you will need to use entity source, but in reality, probably not going to be needing it in all reality. So for example, the enemy in Jedi Way is taking way too long to take over the enemy base. My Star Wars OC would disobey orders and have army clones come with them to save the village. I mean, that's typically what Jedi would kind of do anyway. They, in a sense, they would, you know, um, I mean, the Jedi were close to basically sacrificing themselves to try to save lives. Um, to a fault. So, yeah. Using the information provided by entity source is the other half of the purpose of this feature. There are various methods available to provide the source of the modder, all called on spawn. For example, in global projectile on spawn, there's an entity source parameter. We can use casting to cast the entity source to the source that we wish to check. This code uses the is operator and the property pattern to quickly match a specific set of conditions. So there's some code for you, property pattern approach and non-property pattern approach. For maximum compatibility with mods which add custom entity sources, use is with interfaces rather than classes when they exist. Is with stats from item instead of item use, on hit instead of on hit, on hurt instead of on hurt. all of this, with the IEntitySource instead of the entity source. So note that for most things, you'll have to manually sync changes. On-spawn happens on the client and server that spawns the entity. Any changes that reflect on other clients need to be synced in some manner. The files in blah 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 shows examples of this. Well, we don't really need to worry too much about this. Yeah, or this really wasn't all that helpful. So, okay, localization. This guide is written for blah blah blah. The most recent version of tModLoader and legacy tModLoader localization files won't auto update, and some methods mentioned in this guide do not exist. In the basic concepts still apply. Okay, so typically, just in case any, just um, from what I know right now, without even looking at, their table of contents right at this moment in time. Basically, localization is all about making sure that the your interface is set up so that it can, it works with whatever, um, you know, uh, there's multiple versions out there, or there's multiple languages out there. Okay, so localization is basically making that the user interface works with that particular language, for whoever wants to play using said language, right? So if someone like downloads Terraria and wants to, see their own personal language, like say, Germany, wants to see German, um, they'll set up the localization to go with the German language, and hopefully all the words and whatnot gets changed over to the German language for that individual, right? Um, Now this, I'm probably going to need to handle this. Problem is that I'm going to be in trouble with that because I only know one language. I'm going to be, I'll let you know that, hey, I only know English, maybe a couple words in Spanish, and that's about it for the most part. Maybe a couple words in other languages like, Japanese and German maybe, but definitely nowhere near fluent or, um, you know, being able to translate properly. That's, I'm just going to say that right now. Okay, so if anybody was ever to say like, "Hey Jim, can you translate this?" I'd be like, Google Translator? Even though Google Translator has been quite problematic in the past. So, um, I don't know if how much they've fixed since then. Hopefully they have, but I don't know. Um, so, what is localization? Localization provides the ability for a mod to be played and enjoyed by users who speak a language different from the language the mod author uses. Every piece of text that a user might see while playing a mod is considered in text files called localization files. For example mod has an item called paper airplane in English, but I'm assuming paper airplane in Russian. Though the use of localization, Russian users can understand and enjoy the content of example mod without learning English. These localization files are easy to work with, allowing users without technical skills to translate mods. These translations can then be provided to the mod author or published as a new mod, allowing more people to enjoy the mod. Even if don't intend, wait, what? That's okay. To personally localize your mod to other languages, you will need to use localization files for the one language you do support. This wiki page will cover localization topics intended for the mod developer. If you're interested in localizing an existing mod or providing localization to tModLoader itself, please read Contributing Localization wiki page. So, currently, tModLoader supports the following locales. Listed here are the corresponding default file names. Note that the file names can be different if using a prefix. So you have English, German, Italian, French, simplified Chinese, Spanish, Russian, Brazilian, Portuguese, and Polish. So yeah, I can do the English, but everything else I wouldn't be able to handle. So, and what's just FYI, there's different versions of Spanish out there. So um, even that could be problematic. So, um, the Spanish down in Mexico is not the same as the Spanish in Spain. There are similarities, you know, but there's obviously differences as well. So, localization files are updated at the end of mod loading. This means that a modder will need to build and load a mod after adding content in order for the localization files to update. After they update, the modder can edit the HJSON files to add translations. After this is done, mod can be built and reloaded once again for the translations to appear in-game. To avoid losing work, please be aware of the intended workflow. Add new content to mod, such as new mod item. Build reload mod. At this point, the HJSON files will have automatically been updated with entities for new content. Edit HJSON files to give new content an English name. Build and reload mod. Non-English HJSON files are now updated with appropriate placeholders and can be updated as well by translators or mod makers. So if I create the user interface and I'm using, words, English words to kind of display the tech tree, then I'm going to need to make sure that, um, I can handle, I have those HJSON files for translators to work on that. So if a translator sends you an updated HJSON file to add to your mod directory, be aware that it might get overwritten if the mod loads and the tModLoader detects that the tmod file is newer than the HJSON file for some reason. If this is the case, the best option is to build the mod before loading or reloading the mod. You can build in Visual Studio while tModLoader is closed, or you can skip loading mods when launching tModLoader by holding down the Shift key, then immediately visit the Mod Sources menu to build the mod. If you get to do this and find the tModLoader reverted the newly translated HJSON files to their old content, copy the updated HJSON files into the Mod Sources folder again, and then build and reload. Obviously, if you add more words, then they're going to need to try to fix that afterwards, but yeah. Live updating. tModLoader will detect when HJSON files and the mod sources folder are saved and will reload them automatically while on game. By using this approach, the modder does not need to rebuild and reload the mod to test the new values. If you are using this feature, remember to rebuild a mod before publishing so that all the changes make it into the published mod. Here we see the feature in action. The modder edits the US file and then saves to change the English display name and tooltip of the example wings item. The changes appear in-game after a couple seconds. So here's the English version of it. And then they changed that, and Okay. Well, I mean, sure, that might work on the US here, but I mean, um, if you're changing the localization file, then will that also change? That didn't really get shown there, but I don't know. I would imagine so. I mean, if I like, let's say, hey, I changed a word into English, right? And it automatically shows, in the live updating, you know, you're changing the HJSON files, and therefore, the information displayed is changed, right? Then you can localize over to the other, and then you can change the words in the other language, like say Spanish, right? You go to the Spanish translation, see the fact that the words used is no longer correct, and therefore you know you want to modify it afterwards, right? So the live updating, should be possible as well. Although, um, if you're wanting to do that yourself, then it should be fairly easy. But if you're trying to use a translator, then that might get a little weird trying to get it to work. Like you would have to ask the translator to send you a different, like you would have to send the translator like, hey, I changed this word here to this. Could you send me an updated translation for it so that I can properly put it in? Then that might happen. But yeah, every piece of the text in the game, from the names of items to the words in the main menu, uses localization. Each piece of text in the game is actually a pair of data, localization key and localization value. For example, when the player is creating a small world, the game uses the localization key of world size small to look up the correct translation value for the currently loaded language. This displays the word small to the user if English is selected. If another language is selected, the game still looks up world size small, but the localization value will be different. As the creators of Terraria wrote code in English, most localization keys are very similar to their English translation value. tModLoader mods use the HJSON files to cleanly contain localization keys and localization values. Each language has their own HJSON file. If you're familiar with JSON, these HJSON files will be familiar. Here's a simple example. There's the English version of it, display the item, and so on and so forth. In this example, we can see two main concepts, localization keys and localization translations. Localization key is derived from the combination of all the text to the left of the colon at each of the nesting. The text to the right of the colon is the localization value. And this example communicates two localization keys and their corresponding localization values. Display name corresponds to example item, and tooltip corresponds to this is a modded item. If the syntax seems complicated, do not worry. Modders do not need to manually edit these fields. The game will update them automatically. When the mod is loaded, tModLoader will find all localization files corresponding to the current language and store them in memory. When the game needs to display text to the user, a key is used to query the stored data and retrieve the correct text. Translations are stored in memory as a localized text object. Modders can use the language get text method to retrieve the localized text object from the localization key. The value property can be used to retrieve the localization value from the localized text object. Alternatively, the language get text value method returns the localization value directly from the localization key. tModLoader will automatically assign translation keys to most content. The key pattern is mods.modName.category.contentName.dataName, where modName is the internal name of the mod. Category is supplied by the type of content. Content name is the internal name of the content, commonly the class name. And data name specifies the key within the class. For example, mod item has the category set as items. It also has two separate pieces of data, display name and the tooltip. If a mod named example mod adds a mod item class named example item, then two keys will be generated and added to the HTML files, display name and tooltip. So void spaces and other special characters in localization keys. Substitutions. There's text that repeats often in your localization files, or if you wish to use existing text in game, you can use substitutions to keep your localization files clean and organized. Substitutions take the form of key here in the localization files. When the game loads, these sections will be replaced by the localized text corresponding to the key provided. For example, the game already has translations for the text right-click to open, stored in the right-click to open key. A mod can utilize substitutions to reuse the value. Entity tooltip right-click to open would end up with the text right-click to open in the user's language for this item. Other existing translations, such as item names and other common tooltips, are also available for use. Translations from within the mod can also be used. For example, localization files is used to reuse translations contained in example pylon item key. Many substitutions have 0 and 1 in them, and these placeholders have values modders can provide. This functionality is explained in the string formatting section. So yeah, we're probably going to be using quite a bit of this. Just FYI. Maybe not necessarily. Like I'm not necessarily going to be making translations myself, although I'll probably still try to do like a Google Translate for them anyway, and most likely get them wrong. So for those of you that are like on, hey, this tech tree idea is pretty nice. If you like the idea, I mean, stick with me, and as I get to a point where it's getting to a point where I can release it to the public, then I await any translations that you provide that's better than the Google Translate. So I welcome that. Because I know that I'm not going to be able to give accurate translations myself, and I worry about Google Translate being in the same boat, not being able to add, accurate translations itself. So, all right, existing item tooltips. Using the existing item tooltips provided by the game in your modded items is a good idea. Using consistent language and existing translations makes your mods more appealing to more people. Expand the section below to view a listing of existing common tooltips. Remember that the key for all of these will start with common item tooltip. Other existing translations. In addition to the common item tooltip, translation keys intended to be used for item tooltips, modders can reference any other translation key in the game. Blue slime, for example, is the key to get the localized name of blue slime. Modders can view all localization keys by downloading the .csv file mentioned in the Advanced Language Packs Guide section of the Terraria Workshop Guide. Note that the modded translation keys do not follow the same key pattern as Terraria content. For example, mods Party Zombie has the translation key of Party Zombie display name. The translation key of modded content will not necessarily follow a default pattern, so code should not be written with that assumption. Scope specification. If substitution keys share a scope with the value of the localization key they're being used in, substitution key can be simplified. For example, in localization files, the value of display names key is set to paper airplane. In this case, the game knows to check for keys within the current scope, resulting in, in the value of the key, paper airplane, being found and substituted in. Using this technique, for example, mod name can be omitted from the substitution keys. More text of the substitution key can be omitted, the more it matches the key of the value that it is being used in. Oh my gosh. To be honest, um, I don't think I'm really needing to go over this right now. Um, like clearly there is a lot of content here. You know, they really going into the localization here, which is good. I like the fact that they are covering this a lot, right? Because let's face it, with games going, global, you want to be able to allow for anybody to, play the game anywhere around the entire world, right? And let's face it, English isn't the universal language, Um, no one should be thinking along those lines. You know, I swear I want to slap the people here in the States that are like going, "You're in America, speak English." It's like, oh my God, stupid. Um, you're in America, speak American Indian, you dumbass. um, but still, um, the you want to be able to set up your mod to allow for any kind of translation that you want to go for, right? Now, um, so um, you know, I'll obviously try to, you know, work on this to the point where user interface, yes, it will be written in English. There's nothing I'm gonna be able to do to get around that, right? Unless I magically learn like all the languages on the entire planet, you know, tonight for some unknown reason. Um, you know, um, so, but the way I see it right now is that there's a lot of information here, and this is gonna be something that I'm gonna have to kind of deal with at the end of the mod. You know, when I'm making sure that I get the mod, when it's ready to go, when it's ready to be released, I'll need to come back here to the localization to make sure that, one, I see the fact that, we have the English, file name, you know, available, and then, being able to see, did they change for the, do we have some for German, Italian, French, so on and so forth, right? Um, now, um, one thing that I am kind of curious about, um, I want to open up that tutorial mod, you know, like here, let me. So, you know, here for the tutorial mod where, you know, I have that sword, right? There's an option here of opening the folder. And what I'm kind of curious about is, you know, we have a localization folder and it only shows the US localization. And that's it. They do not have any um, they don't have any other JSON files there for me to use. So now I'm kind of wondering if I was to change the language to say German, for example, and then we go to um, no, sorry, I'm not quite sure exactly where. Hmm. Do they not have the? Oh wait, I haven't. I didn't go back all the way. Okay, sorry about that. So we go back here, and we go into the, you know, the mods, and then we go into here, and then we say let's, you know, rebuild. Now, does my localization file include a German translation? I'm not seeing one, or at least one isn't automatically being created. So let me see if I was to go into the game itself. Okay. So I'm kind of using the like you know, I obviously I'm using positions of the words to really kind of get around. I'm not understanding every word here there, folks, so don't think that I'm like, you know, I know the German language like the back of my hand. I do not. You know, I think um, I think I might have like some numbers down, and then I know that I had to learn Schweinfleisch because when I went to Germany one time to um, for an internship, I had to learn very quickly um, how to try to talk to um, anybody that is working at a restaurant that I couldn't have pork at all. You know, I have a very severe intolerance to pork, so which I know that can be kind of rough in Germany. I know that they love their sausages. Um, but but I couldn't like, you know, um, that's not always a I had to. just work with what I got. Work with what I got. So, um, and I had a English translation dictionary with me as well. So, tried to speak when I could, but let's face it, it wasn't great. Okay, so I'm looking at the localization, and even though I've changed the I changed the settings to handle the different languages. Um, Localization hasn't changed here either. So, so that's kind of interesting that they're not updating the tutorial mod with it like a different translation. Let me reload and see. Like maybe it's a matter of like, hey, if maybe it's just a matter of like they won't um generate the JSON files unless start the game back up again. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. Okay, so there's that. Let me see if anything's changed over here in the localization file. Still no change. It's still only the US localization. Now, nope. I need language. There we go. Alright, well, it looks as though localization does not like automatically create the files for localization right away. So that's good to know. Um, in that, uh, I mean, I would figure that like, hey, if you switch your language around, you know, it should automatically generate the change in the tutorial mod, right? But it didn't do that. It didn't generate a file for me to use to translate it after the fact, right? Um, even if even if the translation, um, like if the localization file kind of gets generated and it puts the English word in that spot and basically says this needs to be changed for German, then that would be fine. In my particular opinion, that should basically be should happen. If I change the you know language settings here, you know, and I still have the mod, you know, loaded, then you know, I would think that it should understand that, hey, I need you to generate a new uh, JSON mod or JSON file for me for this particular language that I'm currently on right at this moment in time. You know, you know using the English words as a placeholder to be translated later for um, you know because you know obviously we get here and the my first sword and my tutorial sword, obviously, those need to be changed, right? You know, because those are still in English. Everything else has been translated. you know, but those two still need to have their translations for in German, correct? Um, but they're not necessarily giving me that. They're not necessarily saying like, or they're not generating the mod, or they're not generating the JSON file in localization right at the moment. Mm. Oh well. Spreche Deutsch, and I probably butchered that. All right. But that's going to be it for today. Localization, obviously very necessary. If I want to have any kind of translations for anything else. Personally, I would be, you know, um, as soon as I get the new mod up um, um, for the user interface um, for the tech tree, um, I'll probably create all these files, the German, Italian, French, Chinese, Spanish, Russian, so on and so forth. Put a comment in there saying this is a placeholder to be later translated. Please provide translations to me so that I can upload them properly and get them set you know on the mod website, that kind of thing, you know, or or at the very least, I would basically say, these are my current translations using like a Google Translate to do a very bad job of translating. Please provide proper translations for me if these are indeed wrong, which I'm going to assume that they will be. so, um, so that's all. Um, but we'll tackle this when we get to it, right? So, um, so contributing to localization. I mean, this again doesn't necessarily um, this doesn't necessarily you know um, this isn't something that I have to worry about right away. So next one tomorrow is going to be the login guide. Um, looking at the client.log and the server.log, we've already seen some errors popping up for that, if you remember correctly. Um, so now I don't know if the client log and the server log are um, still available. Matter of fact, hold on, I'm kind of curious. Um, hmm, okay, and neither one of those files are in the uh, main, main file or main folder here. Okay, don't really see anything there. Content items, nope, nothing there. And bin, debug, net 8, nothing there. Okay, so this is interesting. So the client log and the server log obviously is referring to a file that is on, in a different folder, not just mine. So this will be helpful because if I have some problems with with one of my mods, like I cause a problem with one of the mods and it kind of caused some problems, then I can look at the log folder and go, oh wait, okay, client log, you know, let me look at, what the client log has and see everything that's been kind of placed there and see, was there anything that has been kind of changed there at all? Does it still have the, um, does it have my error in the past at all? Or is it something that gets kind of replaced on the daily? So, um, hmm, okay, I'm not really seeing anything. This looks to be more based off of like today, you know. Well, I mean, yes, but still, I'm not seeing anything from past, you know. So, um, so yeah. Um, so it'll be interesting to kind of read through the log files a little bit more to see what we're going to be dealing with. But for the time being, that's where we're going to go ahead and close on down. We'll look more into the logs next time. This will most likely be very necessary for me as we progress along because if I see any kind of error in my development, then it'll most likely get placed in the logs. So I'll need to know. So um, so yeah, that's where we're gonna go ahead and end today's Terraria modding session. We got more coming up, as you can see. Got a lot of more, a lot more topics to cover, to get through our process of learning the Terraria modding system, um, and get it ready to allow for me to do um, um, the user interface for the tech tree. So, but that's going to be it for today. I want to thank Kirito for stopping by and chatting with me. Appreciate it. Anybody that was just kind of here hanging out and lurking, thank you for being here. I appreciate you being here as well. Check out the description for multiple links: Discord, Patreon, Twitter, Throne, as well as Team Robot. That's down there. Check out the other playlists that I have, all the other VODs and past streams. But that is going to be it for tonight. What we got coming up next is Star Rail, so look forward to that. But that's going to be it for today's coding session. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully I catch you next time. Until then, take care, have a good night, stay healthy, stay safe. I'll catch you strangers next time.